Hey everybody, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars. Today my guest is Teresa Wagenseller, and she's a fractional CFO. She's got an interesting business. She has a interesting take on helping business owners understand their financial situation. She's got 16 financial drivers that she talks about: 5 for revenue, 5 for profit, and 6 for the all-important cash flow. And she's got a really cool story about a cigar. So go grab a cocktail, grab a cigar, strap in for another educational episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. Teresa, welcome to Sales and Cigars. I appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to have a conversation today.
Hi, Walter. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to visit with you today.
All right. What part of the world are you in right now?
I am in Galveston, Texas.
I got a hint of a southern accent. I can never place them, but
Well, I actually have a West Texas accent because I'm from Lubbock, Texas, which is up in the northwest side of Texas. So that's where my accent's from.
I'm not. I don't have that ear to be able to distinguish between East and West Texas or
Oh, okay.
Oklahoma. Or I get I can get the Louisiana accent. That one I could pick out. I have trouble between Alabama and Mississippi. Anyway, so Galveston, Texas. Okay, so let's question I always ask, and I think it's interesting. I've learned a lot about. Is there a book that you reread or you gift often in business?
Well, I have a book I like to read. It's not specifically about business, but I think you could apply it to any aspect of your life. And I do reread it. I have cornered pages that I reread. It helps you to manage stress and anxiety.
Hmm.
It's Alan Carr's Easy Way to Mindfulness. It's not a new book, it's an old book, but it's very helpful in everyday life, I think.
Helps with stress and just not worrying about the things that we can't control.
Basically, yes, just being mindful in the moment. In other words, letting go of your thoughts, um, for example, one of the quotes that he says in the book that pages I have cornered is observe without judgment. And that's actually something that I had to learn to do. Like, I didn't realize I was doing it. But
Hmm.
that's a stressful thing when you're judging everything you're looking at constantly.
Well, it adds a level of complexity to everything that you're looking
Yes.
at and you're doing. What's interesting is that I was reading an article today about um, Coach Reed, the Kansas City Chiefs coach,
Mhm. Mhm.
and he has this old beat up 3x5 card on his wall in his office, and he's had it there for years. And what it says is no judgment.
Mhm.
And one of his old assistant coaches, John Harbaugh, who's now head coach in Baltimore, uh, never asked him about it. And then years later, he's like, "What the hell did that quote or that line mean on the card?" And he's like, "Don't put people in a box.
Mhm.
Don't make a judgment about somebody before you get a chance to see what they can do, and let them be creative." And
Mhm.
it's interesting that one you bring up a book that ties back to that, but I think we create complexity for ourselves by trying to figure out if this is a good person, bad person, without just letting them kind of come
Well,
to us
and
and figure it out.
not even just the person, but the situation or the environment you're in, or I mean, it could be anything, right? And what I know about myself, and mainly because of my work and what I do, I'm naturally analytical. I analyze everything 24/7. And what this allows me to do is to turn that off, you know, be conscious about it and turn it off when I don't need it. I don't need to analyze and judge everything.
Hmm. But it's interesting that you connect it to your work, right? Because
Yes.
uh, my wife is a CPA, an auditor, forensic accounting. She, you know,
Hmm.
does all that stuff. And um, that is constantly. I mean, that's what she's doing all day long. Plus
It's
managing
the
people.
natural mindset.
Yeah, and to be able to shut that down, um, it literally takes focus,
It
and
does.
intent to do it.
Yes.
Um, it's interesting, and
Yes.
I've read tons of books about mindfulness, and um, one recently called Wabi Sabi, which is sort of a
Mhm.
Japanese idea around mindfulness and letting things go,
Mhm.
not being a perfectionist, um, accepting things for what they are, and that we go for a walk in the woods and we can see nature. And if we observe nature as it is, it's never permanent. It's never the same each time we walk through, and it's not perfect.
Mhm.
None of the trees are straight. None of the branches are perfect. The animals do all kinds of weird things. So it's just cool how like all of those things keep poking at you sometimes. It's like,
Mhm. Well, I started reading the book because my daughter, she introduced it to me. He's got some other books related to this. It's the same theme in all of the books, but it's basic. Some of them are basically like to help, how to quit smoking, how to quit drinking, how to, same thing. It's being mindful about it. And I was interested in it because I used to end my day with a drink. And I did that to
calm down.
relieve my mind, get my mind off of work, right? It was
Sure.
the one way for sure that would take my mind off of work and allow my mind to relax, and then I started thinking maybe there's a better way to do that than having a drink at the end of every day. So I started reading the book and found that I really just need some distraction. Um, it's as easy as, like, for me going on a walk, and I get out on a walk and I tell myself, "This is no think time," "I'm gonna enjoy the view," or go with a friend and talk with a friend, and by the time I get back from the walk, my mind is completely, off work, distracted, and onto something else,
Yeah.
and yeah.
It's being intentful about it,
Yes.
and leaving technology behind.
Yes, that too.
My daughter gives me grief. Like I go visit and I leave the hotel to go to dinner, and she's we go do something afterwards, and she's like, "Well, I'll just text you where we're at." And I'm like, "I don't have my phone." She's like, what do you, how do you not have your
How
phone?"
does that work?
And I'm like, "I didn't. I was coming to see you. I wanted to be here. Like, I don't need my phone. And besides, if I need to look something up, I just ask you because you have a phone." Um, but her brain, her 22-year-old brain could not comprehend like why. How do you not have your phone with you?
Mhm.
But it is a distraction. Uh, okay, so tell. We'll get into what you do today, but talk a little bit about your journey to being fractional and helping companies understand what they need to understand with their finances. Like, how'd you get there?
Yes,
Were you
great.
10 and you wanted to be an accountant, CPA?
Well, actually, the funny story is my dad introduced me to it when I was 12 years old.
Hmm.
He drove up to this really gorgeous house on our way to work, on our way to school one morning. And he stopped in front of this house and he said, "Do you know who lives here?" And I'm 12 years old. Like, how would I know who lived there? Like, said, "No, why would I know?" He says, "This is Mike Cunningham's house. This is my CPA." And still clueless, why are we sitting in front of this house? And then he explained to me what a CPA is and what they do. And he makes really good money. So I helped buy him this house. And anyway, it got my attention. It took my interest because my dad knew at the time, I had a love for numbers. I loved anything to do with math, anything theory, not just math, but theory, logic, those kind of things. And I don't from there on, I was on a track to become a CPA. I kind of knew what it was. Not completely sure, but I went down that path and I started out in public accounting. Did that for 10 years. I was tax manager of I did specialize in corporate partnership taxation. I had
Hmm.
over 300 clients. By the time I decided I didn't want to do tax work the rest of my life, um, the thrill and excitement out of tax planning had dissipated, if you will. And I learned real quick my clients, regardless of how much money I saved them in tax planning, they still looked at me as if I worked for the IRS because I'm taking their money to pay taxes. And so anyway, I sold my practice and decided I wanted to go into the industry. And I've been in the industry working up the corporate ladder and for major corporations for the last 25 years. Um, most lately, or fintech companies, SaaS companies in the Houston and Austin area of Texas. Done that for probably the last 5 to 10 years, but I've worked in every industry: manufacturing, wholesale, distribution, retail, service. I've done quite a bit. So at the corporate controller, chief financial officer, those levels, for these companies. And while I loved what I did and climbing that corporate ladder was thrilling to me, I at some point came to the realization that I lost my passion. I lost my fulfillment. It wasn't fulfilling anymore. I lost my drive. It's getting up in the mornings, coming to work, and not being excited about what I was doing anymore. And so a little bit of reflection, and I ran into a few previous colleagues of mine, and we started talking about some, I guess, endeavors that we took on in the past, which one of which was a company that we took public through an IPO on the Canadian Stock Exchange. And we were just reminiscing, I guess, and talking about, the thrill was going in with these smaller companies and working with them to grow them or to reach their goals, to get them to where they want to go. That it's the journey that was thrilling and exciting about it, just like the journey of climbing the corporate ladder. I mean, and
It's a
so
new
I
challenge.
thought,
It's a new
yes. And
challenge, right?
so, yeah, because once you get there, it's, you get to the top or you get there, it's like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
And so I decided I'm going to go back to what I was excited about, what I had passion about. And so that's when I started my own practice, which is a fractional CFO service, tailored towards small, medium-sized businesses. So I'm basically doing the same thing I was doing full time, for the larger corporations, just on a smaller scale, part-time basis, if you will, for the smaller companies.
So I mean, I do fractional work, but
Hmm.
more of a sales management piece. And what what's interesting, there's some parallels with your journey. Um, like I realized that I'd left a really good job that I hated, and then I went to a startup. It never started, so I realized I was going to have to go work for an asshole again, and I didn't want to do that. Um, so I figured it might as well be me, um, and so I started this fractional practice. And what it does is it gives you the challenge as a fractional. It gives you the challenge to keep honing your skills, doing it with different people, like you would with clients in
Hmm.
in your old public accounting practice. But it you get to choose who you want to work with.
Hmm.
You get to choose the types of people that somebody wants to scale, somebody wants to get better, right? Wants to grow, and that are willing to listen to a third party's ideas. To me, that's the attraction, because you have all these skills, you have all this intellectual property that's in your head. Yours is numbers and the rules and what you should and shouldn't do with your money, and how to manage it, and cash and profit, right? That's not my thing. My thing is, salespeople and getting them to think
Hmm.
differently about sales.
Yes,
So
both very important.
yeah, they are, because we help
Hmm.
create the revenue, and you help count it. So a funny story. My daughter was like 5. We had a cocktail party, so she was always an old soul. So she would float around and talk to people. So we had told her, she had asked, like, what do I do for a living? What does my wife do for a living? And like, well, CPAs, your mom's a CPA, and they count the beans in a company, right? They're bean counters. So she's like, okay. I said, but your mom recounts the beans. She's an auditor. She wants to make sure everybody did everything the way they're
Mhm.
supposed to and that they're recount. So at that cocktail party, I had a couple of my friends come up to me. She's like, "Do you know your kids running around telling everybody that your wife recounts beans for a living?" You took it a little too seriously. Um, but it's a vital aspect of any business. And what I found, a lot of entrepreneurs either get it, understand it, can read the profit and loss statement, they can read a balance sheet, they understand what's really going on with their cash, or they have no freaking idea, right?
Mhm.
There's 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 rarely this kind of middle ground where they kind of get it. Um, is that is that something you've experienced?
Most of the businesses I work with, the owners don't get it. And I even have some that come to me, they could even have a flourishing business. Their revenues are driving, like, or um,
Growing.
very successful, yes. And they'll actually tell me, I never look at my financials. They don't understand them. They don't want to understand them. They don't want to deal with the numbers. They don't want to, and I totally get it. And those are my best clients, the ones that, and when they get to the point where they realize, okay, this isn't my forte. This isn't something I like to do or want to do, but I know it's important that somebody, manages the finances of the company. Those are the best clients. And while, yes, counting beans are important, reporting beans to the IRS are important.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to say I will help you keep your beans. It's not always what you make, it's what you keep that matters.
Mm.
And I also work with the companies, the business owners, for future growth. Whereas, most of what CPAs do from a tax perspective or accounting, they're focused on past, recording the past.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like to focus on the future. Where are you today? Where do you want to be? 12 months from now, 5 years from now, let's get you there. We're focused on the future. So there's a little bit of a difference. I've transitioned to that is what I'm trying to explain. And,
Well,
um,
but it's a perspective that, so your type of client is like, they know it's important, but they don't want to deal with it. They know it's
mhm,
important. They don't really understand it. They
mhm.
need to have somebody they can rely on. So you have to build trust with somebody real quickly to,
Yes,
to be
yes.
able to get them to see, that your intent is there,
Hmm.
competency is there, and you're not going to figure out a way to rob them,
Hmm.
because that is possible. But I mean, building that trust is a challenge. I
Hmm.
would think that everybody's a little skeptical at the front end. Is that
You're
fair?
exactly right. Most of the clients, when I started doing this, most of the clients came from people who knew me, who've worked with me in the past. So I had their trust, and credibility with them. And so when they referred me, whether it was on LinkedIn or word of mouth, whichever, um, the clients would come to me, to meet with me, and came with that trust automatically because of who it was that referred them, that they already trusted and knew, and which is very important. And then the other factor too is, uh, with what you're talking about is, how do you, somebody could come to you, how do they know that you can actually do what you say you can do? How do I know that you can actually help me like you say you can? So there's that factor as well. Yeah.
And that's a universal thing for somebody fractional, or somebody in sales, right? Like, prove it, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And there's different ways to go about it, you know, testimonials,
Mhm,
existing customers. Um, but I always ask that when somebody says, do you have any, referrals or testimonials? Like, yeah, you want to know the people that absolutely love me or the people that really, really like me, right? Because there's an underlying question there, right?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody asks that question, are they just trying to check a box,
Mm-hmm.
or is there something specific that they're looking for? So I ask the smart ass question, and then I come back to, what is it you want to ask, because I can align you with the right person so you can talk to them. I'm very protective of my clients. So you're going to get 10, 15 minutes. That's it. So I want to know if you're interested in a certain aspect of the project, so I can line you with the right person. Um, and what I find most of the time, they're just a little skeptical and they're looking for something they can hang on to.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's others that are just looking to check a box, like I did what I was supposed to do, in their mind. So that's always a challenge. One of the things that we had talked about before was, I think there were two pieces. I think they're connected. The 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 business owners thinking, we make all this money, we're successful, but I never seem to have enough cash laying around. Like, where does it all go? Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of one of these ideas that I thought was interesting. And then, the idea of profit, uh,
Mm-hmm.
revenue, profit, right? Which I think they're
Yes.
kind of tied to, those two issues are tied together. Um, can we start talking a little bit about, uh, where do you look if somebody's like, we're doing 10 million in revenue, but I never seem to have enough cash to do the thing that we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you
So
look?
this, yeah, so this is a good question. Is one of my joys in answering, because I do have an answer, and it also, in answering this, I can also, by doing I do a free financial assessment on any new client, but I do that for the main reason of, let me look to see what's going on in your business, because everyone's financials tell a story, right? And if you know how to read that story, you can tell what's going on in the business, what's working, what's not working, what we need to do to fix or to get you back on track, or to enhance whatever you're doing. How can we improve that? And so that's one of the tools that I do use to prove my credibility, in that, yes, I can help you and I can do what I say I can do. Let me show you, how I can add value. And I do the financial assessment, but to answer your other two questions, there's basically three components. There's revenue, profit, and cash flow. And a lot of most business owners are focused on revenue because that's what they understand the best. That's the
Yep.
easiest to go to, right?
Sure. It's
Um,
easiest to calculate. You just go to that
that's
top line.
yes, right. And then you'll hear people say, "Well, profit's what's most important," which profit is important, and profit is also part of cash flow. But while revenue is your driver, cash is king.
Yep.
Cash is always king, and I say that. And cash is more important than profit, and profit is more important than revenue. And I'll explain that with a simple illustration for one. So if you think about, for example, Amazon. So Amazon went into business. They had losses, for years before they started turning a profit. But they stayed in business because they had cash. So it was planned for. And so they had cash resources to keep them in business. So while you can have losses and be in business, which is the profits, you cannot be in business without cash. So cash is king. It's the lifeblood of your company. Now, cash flow is what I focus on first and foremost with most of my businesses, these, small and mid-sized businesses. And in focusing on cash flow, which, in simple terms, cash flow is just the movement of cash in and out of your business, right? Cash coming in and cash going out. And profit's a huge part of that. And we all know how profit works. It's the revenue that come in less the expenses, or what you paid, the expenses that you paid that go out. That's part of profit. Whatever's left over is your profit or your loss. Obviously, if you pay more in
Sure.
expenses than what you get coming in. But ideally, what you want is a consistent positive cash flow. So you want more money coming into your business than going out of your business. You want to generate that money from the operations of your business. That's key. Because, we all know there's other ways to get money out of your business, which is either debt or, capital infusions. You have outside money that's invested in your business. But the money that's generated from the operations is key. And so that's what we focus on, increasing that cash flow from the operations of your business. And then one of the fallacies that I find with business owners is they see they think of profits and cash flow as the same thing. And while they are intertwined, yes, profits are a part of cash flow. They are not the same thing. And to explain that, once you determine what your profits are, which we just said is revenues minus your expenses,
Mm-hmm.
there's another component to that. So that's not the complete full picture of your cash flow. There's other ins and outs of cash in your business, for example, debt payments or, purchase of equipment that takes cash that goes out. There's other aspects, receivables and payables. You have these other items in your transactions going on in your business where money's flowing in and out, but it's not part of your profits. It's outside of what you see in your profits, if that makes sense. And so if you're asking me if the business owner is saying, I'm profitable, I've got money coming in, I have profits over or in excess of my revenues are in excess of my expenses, so I'm making profit, but I have no cash or money in the bank, or I don't know where it went, it's not equal. It's because there's other transactions going on in your business outside of profits that affect your cash flow, that
So
increase
a
and
lot of
decrease
debt
your cash flow.
service,
Debt
a lot.
service, you can have purchase acquisition equipment. Like if you buy equipment, for example, if you have inventory in your business, you're purchasing inventory. That affects your cash flow. That's cash out the door. In receivables and payables, a lot of people don't understand the timing, between those. Collecting money from your customers is cash coming in. Paying your vendors, suppliers is cash going out. You don't see any of these type of transactions in your profit analysis, your income statement, if you will. So they're outside of that picture, and it's confusing to business owners, that don't understand all of these different aspects of cash flow.
But I mean, it's confusing, the cash flow piece of it, because they can't see where it's going in and out. If they took
Mm-hmm.
a closer look at who's writing the checks and or ETFs or ACHs, but it to me, it's if you have a lot of debt, it's gonna just eat up all your profit. So
Yes. Yes.
managing that piece of it, but if somebody put themselves in a bad position and then they take a hit on revenue, I mean you're starting a spiral that's hard to get out
Mm-hmm.
of,
Mm-hmm.
from a financial piece. So is there something that a CPA, a CFO, a controller, is there somebody that they can focus on to help reduce that debt service,
Mm-hmm.
and increase the profit,
So
while
yeah.
there's a flat revenue?
So that's part of like a strategic plan, financial plan that you would put together to manage those inflows and outflows and the timing of those. It's a lot of it's about the timing of when the money comes in and when the money goes out, and that's managing cash flow. So just in simple terms, there are specifically like 16 drivers or components, if you will, of managing cash flow that drive your cash flow. And what I've done is like I've taken the last 25 years of my work experience as a CFO in these companies and like condensed it into a system of managing these 16 drivers of cash flow. So, in a nutshell, there's 5 drivers that drive your revenue, there's 5 that drive profit, and then there's 6 that drive the rest of cash flow. So 16 altogether. I have a system that manages those for any company, any business. It's the same theory, regardless of what industry you're in. And
So if somebody, okay, they're thinking to themselves, what the hell are the five that drive
mhm,
profit? What would be one of the examples of each one of those buckets?
sure. So, like in the revenue bucket, the five drivers there, and any salesperson is going to know these. Maybe not that by these terms, but you know what they are. So, it's leads, conversion rate, retention rate, number of sales transactions, and average sales transaction amount. Those five drivers are what drive your revenue, your top line.
But
And
and those are so important to
they are.
metrics that um, not all of them are measured on a
That's
weekly, monthly
exactly right.
basis.
No, owners
Okay.
do not always measure all of those every month for sure. And you should. Each one of these 16 drivers, each one is just as important as the other. And they all have to be managed, or as I say, you got to watch them like a hawk, right?
Hmm.
Yes, on a monthly basis, consistently. Um, and then your profit is pretty much your income statement. If you're familiar with an income statement, most business owners are. I mean, your profit is your drivers that drive the profit, or your gross margin, um, your marketing expenses, payroll expenses, overhead expenses. Those are the five drivers that manage the profit.
And
And then the cash,
those are big ones too
they're
that
big
that
ones.
can
Yes,
get out
they're
of
big
hand
ones.
quickly.
Yes, yes. It's yes. And I'll go back to say too, a lot of business owners think, if they're struggling with profits or cash, well, we need to go increase sales. They go straight to, we got to increase sales. Well, a lot of times it's not always the sales that's a problem. It could be the margin on your sales. Are you pricing things correctly? What are the costs associated with all the revenue that you're bringing in? This is where, when I say it's not so much what you make, but what you keep that matters. Let's look at the cost, of those revenues, and like for every dollar you're bringing in, how much is going out the door to get that
Yeah.
dollar, right?
Yeah. If some people think they're at a 30% margin when they might be at 11 because they
Hmm.
haven't taken the right factors in place. There's one
That's
thing
right.
that you haven't mentioned yet that um,
Hmm.
it's a check I hate writing um, every quarter, but taxes.
So that's in the next bucket. The third bucket is the drivers that drive cash flow specifically. In other words, they don't hit revenue or profit, but they'll affect your cash flow. And those are any kind of payments or receipts that you get that are not directly related to revenues and profits. One of them is tax payments. That's another reason why owners don't understand where their profits and their cash is going, because they forget about, oh, yes, so after your profits, we got to pay taxes on those profits, right? You
Yeah.
make money, you got to pay taxes.
Yeah.
And, we have to go pay down our debt. We have loan payments to make. We need a new piece of equipment. We've got to go purchase this new piece of equipment. So you've got money flowing out of your business that's not directly associated with revenues or profits.
So I mean, these are things that your system, what you're bringing to them is like you're breaking it down into a very simple, three simple buckets,
Hmm.
with the components of each of those buckets, and you can identify it, and people can grasp those ideas. Now they don't want to do the work, right? As an entrepreneur, they don't want to be messing around with the numbers, but they can all of a sudden like, oh yeah, that the expense of this building and the debt service I have on that, and those the credit that they line of credit they took that's
Hmm.
killing them. They can all of a sudden start to realize that it's the decisions that they make
Yes.
financially.
And the timing of those decisions. Yes.
If you have cash flow that's heavier in Q2 and 3 and you're buying stuff in Q4, you're going to have
Yes.
some challenges, right? But it's
Yes.
having what you're doing is shining the light on these things that seem obvious to you But
Right.
to an entrepreneur who doesn't like to look at numbers, right, and
Mhm.
doesn't want to deal with that, um, like because that's what my wife does. Basically,
Mhm.
I get yelled at one afternoon every month. Like, why'd you do this? I don't know. It seemed like the thing to do. But my point is that you're helping somebody with your system take and have a better understanding how their decisions are affecting their profit, how are affecting their cash. And once they know that and they become disciplined and they don't want to deal with you yelling at them on a monthly basis, right? Not that you yell at people, but they don't want to deal with that. They can start to make smarter decisions. Um, and there's a commonality there with sales. Once they understand with like what I do, what they're looking at the wrong measurement, or they're looking at the thing the wrong way, um,
Mhm.
they can start to be like, oh, okay, and we need to raise our prices or cut our costs.
Mhm. Mhm.
They're all intertwined. Um, I really I love how because nobody's ever explained it to me that way before, so that it like an idiot sales guy can grasp it. So anybody can grasp it, and that's where your experience comes into play. So a successful fractional group, what you're doing is leveraging that intellectual property, that system that you've created to help a business owner solve whatever that problem is. Their problem might be revenue, their problem might be cash, the problem might be the profitability. You can start to identify it and work towards a solution. Is it kind of
That's
that
exactly
simple?
right. So, and that's another reason why I meet with these business owners monthly, to make sure that the decisions we're making and the timing of these decisions are keeping us on track, to hit those goals at the end of whatever term we're looking at. Um, and to your point, yes, I have brought in a fractional chief operations officer and chief revenue officer that
Mm-hmm.
focus on those two areas of the business, same as I do, um, to help that business owner. Because another reason why the business owner is not managing their finances and their numbers is because they don't have time to. They're wearing all the hats in the business and they don't have time to focus on every area of the business like they should. And it's not always a good use of their time, to do that either.
Especially if
So
they don't have the knowledge in it, right? And
that's right.
they haven't built the system
Yeah.
for that particular area of the business. If they're a
Mhm.
revenue guy, they might not understand operations, so they need to bring in a strong operations person. If they're a
Yes.
revenue guy and don't understand finance, they can bring you in. And what you've created is an environment where you can you can have synergy within your organization, synergy for your clients that people
Yes.
can pop in and out to be able to support the right
Yes,
piece.
that's right.
That's
Yes.
a
And it relieves the business owner so that they can focus on what they're good at, right? What they bring to the table, what the reason they went into business to begin with. And that's where they want to focus their time and effort. That's the most efficient, um, you know, most biggest contribution they can make towards their business is to focus on what they're good at. And if you think
absolutely.
about it, it's like that's how the large corporations work. You have a CEO that makes the executive decisions of the path, that the company or the plans of the company, whatever it is, and then he surrounds himself with a team of experts in each area. Chief revenue officer focuses on sales, chief operations officer focuses on operational efficiencies, and a chief financial officer that focuses on the financial health of the company, to align the company's finances with the goals.
It's a entrepreneurs start businesses for various reasons, and
Yes.
there's usually something that they're good at, and then they realize, holy crap, I got to
Got to do all
keep the
this other
building.
stuff.
I got electricity. I got to make sure the bills are paid. I got to deal
Hmm.
with people, right?
Hmm.
So the really the goal for the entrepreneur is to get out of the day to day, to get the
Yes.
freedom so that they can quote unquote run the business and then maybe they get to run the business and focus on the area that they have
Yes.
some joy
Ideally,
around.
yes.
But if they really want to set up a business that's ready to go that they could sell or just take cash out of, they shouldn't have to be there for the day to day. And that to me is the goal. Really hard to achieve in some situations because you also have this other side of that coin for the entrepreneur. They got to let go of some stuff. They got to
Yes,
learn to
you do.
trust some people,
Hmm.
and whether that's an internal or external piece. But that's where the fractional piece helps that entrepreneur ease into that piece, allow somebody to come in, take that off their plate, get it done properly, and then
Hmm.
they can focus on the other pieces. So, Teresa, you said dropped a bunch of I don't know, golden nuggets. And I love the 16 drivers piece. So if somebody heard something that they want to learn more about, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Right. So I use my website more of as a learning tool for any of my clients or potential clients or anyone who's just interested in learning more about the cash flow, how it works, and even what I do. My website is Higher Up CFO Services, and that's higher as in higher profits and higher cash flow, not HIRE, but HIGHER. I have to clarify that.
But we'll
There's
have that
a
in the show notes too.
Okay, great.
So
There's a learning page on there where I actually list those 16 drivers. So you can get a list of them. I also have you're feel free to book a call with me. I love talking to business owners, learning about their business. And I even have a tool. I have a cash flow drivers tool that will manage those 16 cash flow drivers. I'm happy to go over it with anyone who books a call, and I'll give you the tool. You can take it with you, manage your own cash.
awesome. That so I would encourage people to click on the link in the show notes for the website, and there's a I think you call it Learning Center.
Is there a learning center page? Hmm.
Yeah, and that's where they can learn about the drivers with a little bit more detail.
Hmm.
You got ability to book a call. I love it, and I would encourage people to kind of. This is an area that causes a little anxiety, and people are a little comfortable, but it's really important. So spend the time to learn and tap Teresa for any kind of support that you need. Uh, so I appreciate that, Teresa. Last question: any relationship with cigars in the past or
I
current?
have an invaluable memory with cigars.
Hmm.
I don't
Okay.
think I've ever smoked one, but my dad, who was my mentor, and I think I told you a story about him when we first started.
Yep.
Um, so every Sunday, he was big football fan. That he's how I learned about football. I'm a Chiefs fan, by the way.
Hmm.
um,
Good luck
every
on Sunday.
Sunday was football, a cigar, and so my memories are football and cigars with my dad and on Sundays. And to this day, he's passed, by the way. He passed in 89. But to this day, my best home feeling is turn on football. I have football playing all weekend, whether I'm watching it or not. I will be watching Sunday. Um,
We're recording
and
this right before the Super Bowl. Yeah.
I even found a, I don't know where I found it. I don't remember, but it's a cigar candle. And I can light the candle, and that gives me the most warmest home feeling because it's almost like my dad's in the room, you know?
That's a great it's a great story, a great memory. And you can almost pull your dad right back into
Yes.
to your living room.
Yes.
That's really cool. I love that story because it the there's it's something about traditions, right?
Mhm.
That um and smells
Mhm.
trigger those
Sounds and
ideas, those
smells.
memories. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, there's a smell is supposed to be the most the one that triggers the fastest and the strongest of memories. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've been told. So,
Mhm.
but I love that story. Thank you. As I said, we're
Of
recording this
course.
right before the Super Bowl, so good luck. I have
Yeah.
no.
Well, Mahomes is from Lubbock, Texas, from Texas Tech. That's where I went. So that's, yes, I'm a Mahomes fan.
Okay, all right.
Hmm.
Well, I have some clients in Philly, so I have no dog in the fight. The Lions didn't quite make it again this year, so
Right. They came
but
close.
yeah, not close enough.
Not close
Um,
enough.
they were the third loser. Is that how it goes?
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, good luck on Sunday. Thank you very much for
Yes.
your time and your ideas, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I greatly enjoyed visiting with you, and hopefully there's some value in, some of the things that I mentioned on the call for the listeners. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for taking the time to listen and watch Sales and Cigars. Please don't forget to go hit the subscribe button and tell your friends about this. We've been doing this for a while, and I'm trying to grow the audience. And the goal of this whole podcast is to provide value to you, the listener, the audience, the business owner, the entrepreneur. We want to help out the guests and give them some exposure, and I want to have some fun and learn. And that's what I've been doing for the last few years. So please subscribe, tell your friends. If you've got ideas, please ping me, share those with me. If you're interested in being a guest, reach out. Thanks.